Hi, I'm Vicki Stark. I'm the author of Runaway Husbands, and I'm happy to talk with you tonight. I have some questions that I want to answer, and I also want to tell you about this past weekend where we had an amazing retreat. It's a retreat that I do every September. It's called the Jump Up, and usually, obviously, I do it live here in Montreal. But this year we had 42 women who met online, and we spent 2 days, a Saturday and a Sunday, really working through a whole bunch of workshops and also offering them the opportunity to be together and to get to know each other. So we had women from Europe, from Britain, from the US and Canada, and it was really an amazing experience. Something special happens when women get together, either in person or online, and are women who've shared the same thing and really have the time to really talk and really to go deeper and understand what happened. And by the end of the weekend, I think like almost everybody or everybody felt that they could see their lives differently and they felt this tremendous sense of encouragement and excitement. So I'm planning to do another jump up later in the year, probably towards the end of November. We're in 2020. And this jump up will be timed so that women in Australia and New Zealand can participate, and also women in North America. So for us in North America, it's going to be an evening jump up. The timing will be 5 p.m. Eastern Time, and it will go till 10:30 p.m. And for the women in Australia, in Sydney, for example, it'll start at 8 a.m. And it'll go to 1:30 in the afternoon, 1:30 p.m. So it'll be super cool to have us on two different days, but meeting simultaneously at the same time. So if you're interested, be sure you're on our mailing list, and you'll be notified about it. So tonight I want to answer a couple of questions, and one is from Allison, who says, my runaway husband has told me that he's been telling me for years that things weren't right. While I remember the odd occasion where we fell out big style, we have always gotten over this, or so I thought. He had told me things have not been good for the past 10, 23, 30 years, depending upon what day it is. Am I stupid? Have I missed supposedly how awful our relationship and marriage has been all this time, 40 years together? Okay, it wasn't fantastically great, but it wasn't that bad. I think he's in a midlife crisis. So, Allison, I think that so many women have this question, and it results from the fact that when the men leave, they rewrite history, and they focus only on the negatives, and they sort of puff them up, so that they get bigger and bigger and bigger in their mind. And that's a way of justifying their leaving. Like any relationship, there are pluses and minuses. That not every day is going to be a party. It's not going to be good every day. So relationships that stay together have pluses and minuses, and relationships that end have pluses and minuses. But when a relationship ends in this way, the husband uses the minuses as a justification to say it was never good. This is something so many of us have heard. And it's so confusing. It's so mystifying because your experience was that, okay, maybe it wasn't fantastic, but that it was good enough. So, what I want you to understand is that he may have been comfortable in the relationship while he was in it. He wasn't, he stayed in the relationship for 40 years. So, how bad could it have been? And now that he's leaving, he needs to justify his leaving, and he needs to sort of point the finger at you and blame you for it. So you don't need to take that on. You can say it was what it was. I have felt like it wasn't the best relationship in the world, but it really wasn't that. It wasn't as bad as he's saying it is. And you need to own what you believe. Now, the next question comes from Lisa, and it's sort of along the same lines. And Lisa asks, for the runaway husbands who were devoted Did they suddenly change to evil narcissists, or did the masks slip and the evil was within them all along? So, I mean, the basic question is, was he always like this, or did he suddenly change? And this is something that's so important for you to understand, because you want to feel like the years that you spent together with your husband were real and had meaning. So it's not like, and this is what I believe. I believe it's not like during the whole course of your marriage that he was actually biding his time and waiting for the day when he could run for the door. I believe that when he was in it, he was in it, and that at a certain point, and Allison had talked about midlife crisis, that at a certain point, something started to change inside of him. And this change took place, and often, it coincides with the point at which he sort of gets under the influence of the other woman, and he starts to see his life differently. And this change takes place, and that's what leads to him saying things like what Allison's husband is saying, which is, it was never good. So that it's not like he had spent the whole marriage hiding a piece of himself. No, I think that he was truly expressing what he felt when he was the devoted husband that you're talking about, Lisa. One of the things that we're learning more about is the whole covert narcissist idea, and the idea that he has this flaw, this weakness inside of him. His character isn't really fully developed, so that he sort of mirrors the person that he's with. And then when his interest is distracted to another person, he sort of turns that focus on the other person. And his, he becomes a mirror of what the other person wants, or the kind of man the other person wants him to be. So while he was mirroring you, that was who he was. And then when this transition started to take place inside of him, then he moved on, and he could sort of just walk away from you. But I think it's very important, again, to feel as though the relationship was real, the marriage was real, and when he was your devoted husband, that's who he was. And that at some point, something shifted and changed. And then the final question's from Janet, who's asking, at what point do your friends give up on you? I feel like they're about over it, and they don't care to hear anymore. It was, oh, here we go. I'm 14 weeks out, trying hard not to dwell, but I have nobody but them, and I'm so lonely. Yeah, 14 weeks. That's just a number of months. Of course, you're still suffering. And of course, you need to lean on your friends. But what is happening with your friends is not that unusual, that at a certain point, they sort of have saying, enough. I really, every time I talk to you, we're talking about it, what he said, what he did, what really happened, what the newest thing is going on in the court case. And after a period of time, they get what we call compassion fatigue. And they just can't be compassionate anymore. And they're sort of feeling like, oh, do we still have to keep talking about this? And the reason for that is that people don't understand the extent of the trauma, because they can't see it. I mean, yes, they know that he left and they know that you're suffering. But after 4, 5, 6 months, very often people feel like, all right, can we speed this thing along? Can we move this along? And it's, first of all, you need to know it's perfectly normal to still be dwelling after 14 weeks. And that most people are, if not all women are, who've gone through this. And however, on the other hand, you may need to make an effort so that your friends don't sort of dread seeing your name on their call display. And I remember one thing that I did was I would check the news, and have something to talk about other than it when I would see some friends or talk to friends on the phone. So I would, talk about something in the news or something that was going on. Like I'd prepare something, and I know it sounds pathetic, but I did, because I felt like, maybe I was sensitized to the fact that they don't always want to just talk about that. So I think that sometimes you have to rise to that occasion and really become a good listener, what's happening in their lives, what stories going on with their kids, and maybe save the really heartfelt suffering to one or two really close friends, but also to check in with those friends and acknowledge it and say, look, I know I'm not much fun to be with. I'll really try my best. But I just really have to talk to somebody about what's going on. And then just ask them, is this too much for you? We want this idealized picture that friends can handle everything, but sometimes they can't. They have their own issues, they have their own depression, their own anxiety, and they can't necessarily have the broad shoulders that you might need for them to be able to, so that you can really lean on them. So it's a balancing act between being able to express what you need to express and also being careful not to damage the relationship. And just finally, the one thing that I did do, after I sort of got through all of the really hard times, is that I went to a store and I bought jewelry for my friends. For the 4 or 5 friends, and some of them were in New York, I'm in Montreal, and I sent them all necklaces and bracelets, and I felt good about that. So that might be something, a tip that you might want to do. So that's us for tonight. Take care, and I'll look forward to seeing you next week.